Welcome to Boulevard's Big Three, where we get to talk about this week's sermon with questions from you, me, Daryl, and Brandy Park. We're in week 5 of the Upside Down movement, and we've been challenged every week.
Yeah, we really have been, and that's a good thing. Let's say hello to our guest this morning, Brandy. This is 2 weeks in a row that you've been able to grace us with your presence. We appreciate that. Last week, Brian was with you. How did we manage to get you on consecutive weeks?
John called me from another continent, and when he calls you from another continent, how can you say no, right?
There you go.
So here I am.
There you go.
Well, we're so glad that you're here this morning. And we call this the Big Three, so let's get into some observations or a highlight from this morning's sermon. Do you want to start us off, Brandy?
Yeah, sure. I love that Skid pointed out prayer always precedes power, right? And that power or prayer is actually a form of submission. And you know, the 87 in the world would tell us that power brings submission, but in an upside down kingdom, King Jesus, submission to him brings the power. And I love on the other side of that the Lord is so good and that he confirmed it and made it known, like shaking the ground, just making it known that they were seen and that he heard and that he was with them. Like what, it's just so good.
Yeah, and I wrote down that when the place shakes, God's power is there.
Yes, yes. And it makes you think, like, what are the things that shake in your life? Like looking for the shakeable moments in your life where I like to call them God winks, where he's there and he's like, I see you.
I can just imagine the Father saying, have I got your attention now?
Right.
So that's great.
Yeah. I'll share one. I loved when Skid was talking about how he just broke down the gospel into 3 small little statements of you killed, God raised, we are witnesses. And that is, if you were to break the gospel down into the most simplest form it could possibly be, that would be it.
Yes,
Yeah.
so good.
Okay, so here's what jumped out at me. I know I've read this before. It's not a new verse. I've read it before. But that piece in there about how Peter helped him up.
Yes.
You know, I want to say that I'm of that mindset, but I know that every now and then I've, it's there. Read it, do it. Go ahead. You can handle this. But with Peter helping him up, taking him by the hand, that's a sermon in and of itself.
Yes.
That will preach.
Yeah.
He took him by the hand and helped him up.
Yeah.
That jumped out at me.
It was really good.
And I know
really good.
for me, I would, like, things that, like, especially having grown up in the church, things that I think are normal or that I've understood for years, I forget that not everybody is just going to put those things together and automatically understand the same things I do or know the same things I do. And so having that patience and understanding that this is the first time that that someone else I'm spreading the gospel with is going through these things or learning these things. And so having that patience to walk with them and help them up and help them get on their feet in faith.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, I love how Skid went through the Acts prayer. That's something that I learned in school.
Yes.
And I forgot what the letters stood for. And I think that is a really good way to pray. And it very much models the Lord's Prayer when Jesus starts out with honoring God and acknowledging his power and then saying, like, asking for the things that they need and asking God to forgive us of our debts. We've also forgiven our debtors. And it goes through, maybe not in this exact order, but it goes through all of these different things as well.
Yeah. And for a mind that, like, is all over the place and trying to get it together when you're praying, like that is a good framework to go by. It is good.
Yeah, and at one point I just stopped taking notes and just started underlining, like, everything in my Bible as Skid was going through it, and I was like, oh, I never noticed that. or like when he was talking about, my Bible calls Jesus the source of life, but when
Yeah.
it says you denied the holy and righteous one and asked to have a murderer released to you, you killed the source of life, whom God raised from the dead. We are witnesses of this. How
Yeah.
you let a murderer lived and murdered life.
Yeah.
I thought
Yeah.
that was a really, really cool,
Good way to phrase it.
like,
And just the story about Tony, you know?
Yeah.
So if anybody's listening or watching and you know Tony, you need to get with Skid.
That's
You need to
true.
get with
Yeah.
Skid. But
The
just
search
to
is on.
just to see like the power, like that was a shakeable moment.
Yeah.
That was the Lord.
Yeah.
Just confirming with these guys. I see you. I hear you.
Tell the
you
Father
never
shook it
know.
up.
You never know what just living like Jesus and sharing your faith will do. You never know who's watching.
Yep. Yep. That'll preach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And who you don't think is watching really is watching. So, and
And
I'm
even
just
if
gonna
you
say
only
this.
had an audience of one.
I'm going to say this to you. You've got a young man sitting over there, and I know he's watching his mom all the time. He's watching his dad all the
better or
time.
worse.
We are role models, whether we want to be it or not, to
True.
our kids. So,
true. So
keep
true.
it up. Keep going at it. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
okay. If you have more questions, and we know you do, you've always got a question. If you've got more questions, use the QR code on the screen. Send them in. Let us deal with them. We want to answer your questions. We want to take you by the hand and help you up. So send them in.
Absolutely. And if you're wanting to re-watch this sermon or watch it for the first time, you can find it at boulevard.to/sermons.
That wraps up this week's Big Three. Thanks for joining us.
Make sure to look for this podcast on your favorite platforms and be sure to join us next week for Boulevard's Big Three.